Today is our last presentation this semester with the Guided Pathways team, and we'll continue similar presentations in the spring of how we're implementing Guided Pathways practices already. But these were design principles, these were the same across Maricopa, and we wanted to make sure that PBCC, faculty, staff, and students were all aware of what we're doing as a system. And so today we're going to have a Fields of Interest presentation, which version 1.0 Fields of Interest has just been completed. And then mapping, we'll discuss mapping and where we are in the mapping process. So Professor Johnson and Heiser are here to present Fields of Interest.
Okay, hi, good morning everybody. So Fields of Interest, you might have seen an email that came out earlier from district today talking about the version 1.0 of Fields of Interest. So this is just going to be a quick little introduction into what Fields of Interest means. So if you're at all familiar with the Guided Pathways model, it's based on the idea of meta-majors. I don't know if anybody here has heard that term, but basically what it's doing is it's grouping related areas of study into kind of broad categories. And the purpose of doing that is to try and make sure that every student coming in at least is filtered into one of these fields of interest. So a lot of times students arrive at college and don't know what to study, and our academic categories sometimes doesn't always make sense to them unless they've had a pretty strong background in academia, like parents who have gone to college, and sometimes even then, a lot of times they don't know, if they're interested in literature, that means that they need to go see the English people. Sometimes that doesn't make a lot of sense. So field of interest is just a broad category that is more relatable to the students. So our fields of interest, as you can see from this slide, not only clarify things for the students, but also help us to create program maps that are similar, but not always, as Dale will tell me in a few minutes, but foundational courses that are going to be the same for all the degrees across that field of interest, so that as students refine their career goals more, they'll take classes with other similarly minded students and gradually filter into a specific degree program that fits their needs. So these are going to be shared across the district, and also this helps our industry partners as well, who also sometimes don't understand academia as well, but this helps them connect more readily with the students that are going to potentially be their employees. So I kind of touched on some of this already. So hopefully the goal is with the fields of interest that it helps connect the students to the importance of what they're learning every single semester, even starting in the first semester. Even if they aren't taking a specific degree course yet, they're at least embedded in a community of like-minded students and taking foundational classes that are geared toward that set of students, like Ryan Stone is developing English 101 and 102 that's specifically geared for fine arts majors. So specialized classes that maybe are a foundational course, but still geared toward what the ultimate goals of those students are. So the fields of interest were done by a collaboration with faculty advisors, industry partners, and the instructional councils. And so the version 1.0 that just was announced has 9 fields of interest. So students from day one will identify with one of these fields of interest, and they're listed all there. And so from the very start, even if they don't know specifically what degree program they want, they at least are in that field of interest. Obviously this isn't 100% because, taking my personal example, I would have switched entire fields of interest in the course of my undergraduate studies, and then again for my graduate studies. But usually somebody who is interested in STEM, probably even if they change from science to mathematics, they're still in that STEM category. And so if they switch what they thought they wanted to do, they haven't lost any credits. They're still on essentially the same path going forward.
And earlier this week, we received an email that had many attachments, but specifically 9 attachments that break down the different fields of interest. And so I created 2 different handouts that you see in front of you. And this is an opportunity basically I just copied and pasted from the documents district sent us. And so this is an opportunity, if there's any errors in here, for us to provide feedback back to them. So we already found one program that really is not a PD program. So that's an opportunity, again, for us to say, hey, this needs to be updated. So if there's a program on here, it's like, well, we don't offer that, or you're missing this program, this is an opportunity for you to talk to us, and then we can provide feedback back to the big team. So one handout just lists fields of interest that PVC currently has, and these are certificates and degrees, although there are programs that we have on the campus that are not listed on this document because they might not have a degree associated with that program. And then the fields of interest, you can see the 9 broad categories, and again, version 1.0. So like an example, my instructional council for health sciences, we kind of have a struggle with beauty and wellness being in our field of interest. We don't really see how that relates to us. So there's an opportunity again to provide feedback, and so they're, again, looking forward to 2.0 or 1.2.
Yeah, so there is a process to make changes to these fields of interest, because there's no expectation that this is going to be the last word at all in what fields of interest are going to be.
So Dale, the question ultimately, with the student outwardly facing document, I know this is not this, but the student outwardly facing document will have some way to communicate all the transfer pathways as well that don't have a degree or certificate.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
And so you look at this and you might say, what does exercise science have to do with fire science? And so the logic of that is like these careers all really focus on helping people. And so if somebody's asking a student, some sort of assessment or instrument or tool to see the student's interests, it's like, oh, well, here's a commonality, here's a field of interest that might be for you.
So, like we've said, this is version 1.0, and we do have 2 campus reps that serve on the fields of interest team at the district level. So that would be Norma Chandler and Stacy Smith. So you can always ask them any questions. Are you guys going to continue to meet?
Yes.
Going forward? Okay. Yeah, so any concerns and errors like we've discovered can be addressed going forward. And that's it. So, questions?
Hi, so, my name's Deanna, and I'm one of the analysts here at PV, and we were meeting, the 3 of us, the other day, and so our question was, how are students going to declare a field of interest? A. B, if it's offered in SIS for a new student to select that, what do current students do to get into a field of interest?
Honestly, I do not know what that tool is eventually going to look like. I believe it's under development, but at this point, it hasn't gone that far yet.
So just to put it out there, though, that is something that we feel like we need to
Yeah, definitely.
be able to find those students who would be in our cohorts.
Yes, yeah, agreed.
I can speak just very tiny bit to that, because the missing piece in this for you also is how we're going to identify students, and then how we're identifying them based on what their career interests are, and that would be the starting point. And what I heard yesterday at the meeting at district was, because I said, how are we coming? Because there's supposed to be a committee that has been formed that is looking at how we're doing the career exploration touch points across all these different areas from the students coming in and then onward. And so, what I told yesterday that actually the presidents are, do you know that? The presidents.
What are we doing this
New
time?
information for you.
What are we doing
There's
now?
going to be a team, they want the presidents involved in that because they feel like the presidents are feeling slightly removed from this process. So I don't know how they thought that would, so anyway, that's just a,
We're always slightly removed with everything.
so, but that's the missing element here is you have your student come in and then now what? So, in the case management style of advising, you're having deeper conversations, but you still need to have some kind of quick tool at least to get them in the ballpark or at least start the conversation.
Yeah, so how do we capture those students? in these
Exactly.
fields of interest?
I mean, I can share, and all kidding aside, is that one of the interests of the presidents is, again, this is like the inward architecture, scaffolding, what's it gonna look like for the student experience? How is the outwardly facing fields of interest gonna be communicated to students and how they navigate that? That's an interest that we have, which ties in, I think, the issues raised around advising as well, too.
Usually they were originally been saying that Daniel Barajas was going to be coordinating this group of people across disciplines and areas of the college, academic affairs and student affairs, to talk about this. And so when I heard his presentation yesterday on the industry partners, and then when he was done, I'm like, but what about the career part? Because we need to have that, if we're launching all of this, we need to have that element in place. And so that's still hanging out there a little bit. A couple of things about fields of interest that I can just update you all on a little bit. One is obviously version 1.0 is going to run. Has to run once so we know where the gaps are. The intent of the FIO team is to disband the project team, but have a few key people on each campus who have, and it can be a change every 2 years, 1 year, things like that, who will be kind of overseeing how it's working so that you know what's working, what's not working on your campus. Obviously, it'll have to be reviewed after the first spin, and then after that, their plan or their hope is that they do a rolling evaluation of how it's working. And so they will have us, and I think they're going to try and divide our fields of interest into 3 groups. So first year, they will, deep dive into, is this one, these third of it working well, so that'd be 3, because we have 9, right?
Mhm.
Second year would be the next 3, the third year would be the next 3, and then the fourth year it starts over again. So that would be this continual rolling out so that we can make adjustments as we go along based on what the experience is at the various colleges. So it needs to be a continuing process. But we can't do anything unless we start.
So will those fields of interest be in SAS? Will they be selectable by a student who's signing up?
I don't know if they've made a decision how it's going to be student-facing yet, because it's still complicated when you look at it. It'd be very daunting for a student to take a look at a path right now, because it still looks like this massive tree.
But they can
So-
select a field of interest.
Right.
Good.
So how they're going to do that, I don't know yet.
I was wondering if, in conversations like, I know the CIC hasn't been involved in getting together with the other folks that are in the same field of interest. But are we gonna work together as fields of interest?
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because actually, the changes that, let me just look at my notes here, that arise during the period, the ICs will be involved with the evaluation process that happens. Yes, so the answer is yes, the CIC should be involved.
But like, we haven't gotten together yet. Like, other counseling, EMT, science, tech, whatever. It would make sense if they all got together to talk about what similarities they have, how they can market to, there's opportunities.
Jim, I heard a rumor that the all faculty convocation as part of the afternoon structure was meant to be around fields of interest, and so you're not dialoguing by discipline across the system, but by field of interest across the system. Now, I haven't seen the agenda to know if that's actually what's occurring, But I did hear that, but just what you're bringing about is that these fields of interest are being created, but the ICs or the faculty within have never had an opportunity to necessarily engage with the other respective ICs within their field, so. And we could even consider that locally, by the way. I mean, we could try to craft some sort of experience where we're getting our folks together around fields of interest, see what that looks like, what does it feel like? You know, I don't know, it's interesting, some of the pairings of the ICs, if you will, that are connected with that, it's a different lens to look for us.
And I know we haven't talked about it yet here, but at other colleges, they have a counselor and an analyst tied to each field of interest, and they are getting together.
Interesting.
So it is already happening in other colleges.
And I don't know why it's not happening
I
yet.
don't-
Ask, and there's
Very
no
unclear.
answer that.
Yeah.
Counselor like from your division?
Yes, so a counselor would be associated to the applied technology, and an analyst. Not just an advisor, but an analyst would be tied to the applied technology. And the behavior science and human services would have a counselor and an analyst.
What's an analyst?
Academic analyst.
The new,
The 114th, okay, I didn't know the analyst, okay.
that's right, yeah, I didn't call
Gotcha,
it.
okay.
No, we still have, we're still missing one or two, and advising is still 2 people short, 3 people short,
Okay.
and we, we're just hammered.
Is that just similar to like the nursing, you know, the nursing program, they have a designated person, right? To advise that.
Yeah, but they don't have a,
Yes.
Yes.
but they don't have like a
You
designated
are the one?
counselor.
Ah, I work with nursing, and they didn't know who.
See, that's the difference,
Yes.
is that we don't have, we're not together. Like you, I could be, we don't have one for nursing, but we should, for counselor. And with the 3 of us should get together, and whoever else is part of that team, Nellie and so on, that's something that we could do locally, like Eric is saying, is if we put together teams of people around these, then we can talk about what does this team need for support, suite of support, and how we're gonna work together to get, so they're more seamless, because if, you know, whoever put these 2 together feels like EMT and counseling go together, then they're thinking that the students should be able to seamlessly move between those. That seems like, they're like, yeah, that's at least the most basic assumption. But we haven't got together, so maybe that's what we
But
can,
that's something to think about, maybe learning week would,
Yeah.
pretty short planning, but,
maybe not learning, but yeah.
right.
All right, well, we want to turn it over to.
I just
the
want to say something.
Okay.
It also can be a little bit more confusing because we have instructional councils that have multiple certificates and degrees, but the programs are sitting in different fields of interest as well. So, just to say, if we do a lot of organization around these particular fields of interest, it likely will change a little bit in the future.
Thank you. I would also offer that Matt Jolly and Yvette are going to come to campus in the spring and do a fields of interest presentation. They're the 2 project managers on fields of interest.
Just before we leave, can I just ask one question? I'm really interested in distribution of students. Is there an anticipated distribution of students around fields of interest? You look at a few of these fields, and they seem incredibly broad, that we could have 65% of our student population in 1 or 2 fields of interest, which then could help us understand what resources are needed to support that field of interest, versus some, education is its own separate field of interest, if you will, but that's not going to have a large percentage of our student population, have a percentage. So I'm just intrigued if there's if that's in the dialogue right now about how we distribute these and what the student distribution looks like. So no answer needed, it's on my mind.
And that's on our mind too. We
Yeah.
have not been able to get.
We talked about that in
Three
thrown
analysts
around,
and
it was,
here.
it was, all of the fields of interest were centered around it. It's just that- well, the one that, if you pick a particular area in the field, then it's, but if you pick a, say, career program, nursing,
We'd like to know. We're curious too.
So these are all great questions.
I heard
Yeah.
CBD 150 will be changed.
Yes, and we don't have, I can't
No
confirm or
detail.
deny that, or, you know, we don't, these are all excellent questions that you're asking them. I think the danger in some of this is hearing bits and pieces and then assuming it's all factual and true, and there may be some truth to some of these things, but, yeah, we don't have.
Yeah,
any
the one thing to
answers.
keep in mind is that these fields of interest were only established in August. So that's when they were even
I guess what I'm saying
created.
is if somebody takes advantage of the AJAC, like, they feeling like they've gotta declare a field of interest, may push them away. Like, I don't know that that's, I mean, there should
I
be
think they've
some
seen that.
contingency
I heard there's gonna be an exploratory pack.
Okay, that works.
Well, we suggested it, but.
That's what I heard.
Yes.
I don't think you should like have to make some, you still want to capture them and you want to capture that data. I mean, you want to have that available and there's no outlet for it. And I think it's important to know how many of our students fall into that category. He's talking about doing data mining here. You need to be able to capture it correctly.
Yeah.
I have a question you may, you guys may or may not have answered, but we had a consortium where we did break out with counseling, career services, and other people talked. We came up with some ideas, consensus. Where does it go from there? Because I'm not hearing the conversations that we had at that meeting being shared. Right? What
When
was
was
it? It was at Phoenix College, where we broke out into the health sciences building and talked.
Is that the dead end?
For the dead
Oh,
end.
that, the dead end. Was I there?
Yeah.
Dialogue day.
Is anyone next week?
Oh, okay.
Was it that bad? Dr. Daly, you were there too? In the copper room?
I thought that
was
was a global meeting.
Oh, I know what you're talking about now, sorry.
Okay.
And then your question, I don't.
My question is, we had
Oh,
a
that's
very
right.
robust conversation. People were broken out into different sessions, and it's like, where is that coming back together to be shared to the larger population?
Yeah, that was the
That's the
consortium
EAP.
around the, remember the points of pain and the secret shopper and all that stuff, is that
Yeah.
follow-up. And I haven't heard anything since then, Norma.
That went to Felicia Ganther in her office, I believe.
Yeah.
So the next bit of this presentation is on mapping, and there is an entire pathway mapping website that's been designed by the project management team. So rather than recreating a PowerPoint, we thought it'd be best just to go here and explain a little bit more what's going on with the website. Many of the questions that faculty and staff ask about mapping, a lot of those answers are found right here. So Ryan's going to give a bit of an overview.
So basically, there's been a couple of questions that I've run into in the hallways and so on and so forth as we moved around. And the two big ones, well, the one big one is, how do I get involved with mapping? And another one that has come up occasionally is, where do I go to get my course on the map? How do I get my course on the map? So Doug's going to talk a little bit later on some of that, about how you get, about courses on maps and so on and so forth. But I wanted to share some stuff about actually getting on the teams. At one point, there was a scheduling service that the mapping team put together. That produced a lot of confusion, apparently, and they did away with that. So it's no longer where it's set up to be to the point where you are actually trying to schedule your mapping for your program. But if you're interested in that, you can contact the folks at the mapping team. If you scroll down to the bottom, I don't know if it's on this page, it's on every slide. Right here at the bottom, this email is the magic email for all mapping things, almost all things mapping. If you send an email to that site, if you're interested in being on a mapping team, if you're on an IC, you're going to be invited to be on a mapping team, most likely, okay, if you haven't been already. If you are interested in serving on a mapping team, and our English division and our math division both have division meetings, like right now, so the core foundational faculty in those divisions are really needed to serve on mapping teams, but we need more than just that. We need counselors, we need advisors, they need other faculty from other disciplines, they need a lot of different types of folks in the room, because the idea behind the mapping process is to get a variety of perspectives and a variety of experiences in the room that can provide information into the map. Okay? So if you're interested, you send an email here, I'm interested in this. There are mapping sessions scheduled going forward, or mapping sessions will be scheduled going forward in the spring and in the summer. There were some opportunities in intercession. I'm not sure anybody took advantage of that. I tried to with creative writing. That fell on its nose real fast. So looks like we're going to schedule for the spring. This is everything that's currently scheduled, okay? So if you don't see, if you go through this calendar, and you don't see your discipline on this calendar, you might want to email someone on your IC. Or you might want to get in contact with the mapping folks and make sure that they have actually updated the calendar, okay? For faculty, if you work on maps outside of time of accountability, there is pay for this. It is only outside of accountability hours. So if you work on a Saturday for mapping, or if you work during the summer for mapping, there is funding for paying faculty. Let's see, I think that was about it as far as getting involved. What about the team there? Yeah, there we go. Here are the folks that are involved. Many of you have probably at least heard these names. If you've been involved with the Guided Pathways projects at all, you know some of these people. Down at the bottom are the specific individuals who are, Elise and Yvette are the sort of point people on mapping. They came to our creative writing mapping sort of informational kind of meeting where we found out that what we need to do. And they're very good. They're very good at responding. They're very good at getting back to people about questions and so on and so forth. So.
Can I ask how much has been mapped?
Oh, that's the, the golden egg, right? We have, I believe there are over 200 some odd maps to complete. There are some on here, and I was going to leave that, Doug, to kind of go through a little bit. Where are we at, Doug? Not very far along.
Right.
less than half. And also there are some of these maps that are on here. We're not sure how up to date this particular portion of the site is. Some of these maps are in various stages. Some of them are all the way to the point of governing board approval. Others of them are in earlier stages of completion. But here at the bottom, there's a list of the maps that have been completed. Additionally, and Doug will show you this here in just a few moments, there are actual outlines on here of maps and that are a little more student facing. They're not student facing yet, but they look like what you would expect a program discipline outline to look like for a student. It's broken down by semester, credit hours to take, courses to take, so on and so forth. So, and they're just in an Excel spreadsheet right now, but they're a little bit more straightforward than that mapping document that you sometimes see that has all the different lines and so on and so forth. That's really more for programmers. So we're not very far along in the process. A heavy percentage of the mapping is going to take place in spring and summer. It's going to be a lot of work. And the bottom line is that especially from faculty side, we're just going to have to pony up and we're going to have to go do it. That's just going to be what it's going to be, because if we want to be involved in this process, and so we're going to have to go out and be involved in the process and give up a Saturday. I mean, that's just where it's at. I mean, I don't particularly like to give up my Saturdays. I'm at baseball tournaments a lot with my kid, but I'm going to have to do that to be involved in this process. So. Any other questions at this point before I turn it over to Doug? Anything I left out that
That's pretty good. Faculty, staff, everyone does get paid outside of accountability. So for integrated public health, we've been meeting on Saturdays. And so faculty and staff, yeah, we get to meet again tomorrow morning.
Yes, staff too, I'm sorry.
There is compensation for
Yeah.
that. And Ryan's absolutely right. These mapping teams are made up of at least 10 different individuals with foundational faculty, advisors, counselors, curriculum folks, and coaches, as well as content experts. When those people are all at the table, the mapping process works better. Just from the last 2 weeks ago with Integrated Public Health, we had questions and our English faculty member was able to answer them. We had questions about process and Deanna was there as our advisor and she was able to answer them just like that. We had some math questions and we were missing a math faculty member. And, so we went ahead and figured it out anyway, because that's what we do. Math seems to be pretty straightforward. So.
I just mention, librarians in the district, we have a GPS mapping task force. I serve on it.
Yes.
And so we also assign people who have certain background knowledge. Like Fran has technology background, and she is on the cybersecurity team. So that's how we also get updated.
Yes. And so there's plenty of opportunity to get involved. One thing that I think is a bit of a downfall is the lack of communication. So if you sign up to be a foundational faculty member to MAP, or you just want to volunteer to MAP, no one is necessarily telling myself or Diane or Tanisha that information on our campus. So we don't know who is helping from our campus. From my different conversations with people, we do have pretty good interest and pretty good involvement on these mapping teams, which is great. But if faculty, staff, they're saying, well, I'd love to do it, I just don't know how. You know, Ryan pointed out the email address here. People can always email us and we'll connect them. But it would be helpful if you sent an email to copy one of us from PVCC so we could know how to help you and that you were involved. This is kind of the overview of what a map does. They're all housed within these different fields of interest. And like anything with guided pathways, we're starting with the end in mind. And then throughout this, it's beyond just course sequencing. Yes, we are putting courses together in full-time and part-time statuses, but it's also what's going to happen in that semester. We put in those mile markers of this person gets a check-in from their analyst, this person should be doing their internship at this point. I think one of the candidates talked about being an education major and not getting in a classroom until their 5th semester in college, figuring out that they didn't want to do education. We want to avoid that at all costs. We're going to do internships and career development at the front end. Capstone, how many of our students are at that 40 credit mark and have just a few more to go, and we're not making contact with them right now. We want to make sure that when they're getting close to completion, they're getting lots of contact so they know how close they are to finishing and moving forward. If you want to go in the About Pathway Mapping to the mapping process, yeah. This is the team I was referring to with all of the different folks, and one part that is a little different, and I think it would have been helpful with integrated public health, is to have an industry partner at the table, and we've been pushing for that at the Occ level, to not simply be in-house for our occupational programs, but also our industry partners, because there's a lot that goes into it. One of the things that was most surprising and a little frustrating with the mapping from what I've been involved with is we have these maps in the CCTA website and degrees that say that they're 60 credits, 64 credits, 66 credits. And then as we go through these with the mapping team, we're finding that those 66 credits are true, but then you also had to have all the prereqs on top to make that degree about 80 credits. And then we hear, because this is starting to make a lot more sense, right? We started hearing all these Maricopa students have 80, 90 credits when they move on. How many of our degrees are truly 80, 90 credits? And that's why it's taking them so long to move on. So a huge positive is that we are trying to remove that barrier. We are getting those degrees where they should be. The students really could complete in 2 years. How could we complete in 2 years with an 80 credit degree with our student base? So that's been a big bonus. But you can see everyone that's involved. It truly is a great experience. I would encourage you to do this. You meet people across the district. You learn a lot more about different disciplines. You learn a lot more about what goes into an advising process, about a career process, about a faculty process. So overall, as a Learning Center College, this is an excellent learning opportunity. We need more coaches. We just took a group of faculty and staff from PV to the coaches training. Myself, Jim Rubin, Julie Olander, Marianne Otten, I feel like one more person was there, have all been going through that training process. So if you want to be a coach, it's more like a facilitator, that's also an option for you. You can share that with your faculty and staff. If you want to go to our maps and pick one of those. Do behavioral science, yeah. And then scroll down. Let's do, come over here. A little bit lower, a little more towards the bottom. So you can see the CCLs and then the associates, yeah. Yep. So this is kind of the end product of the mapping. This is where we dissect the degree as it is across the table with everyone and figure out how can students complete this work as a full-time student. And again, this is where when you're going through and you're looking at some of these classes and you see that there's a CIS 292 and it's like, okay, but somewhere along the way they had to take CIS 105 to get into that class. All of our maps right now have CPD in there as a minimum of 0 to 3 because we're not sure where we're going with CPD, as I think was mentioned earlier. So if it's not required, you can see up there, there's 12 credit hours in that first semester. If it is required, then they're gonna have to take 3 if they test out of reading, or now with our GPA and our DevEd reform, if they don't need that reading class, it's 12 credit hours. Otherwise, they can be looking up to 18 credit hours for that first semester. And is that realistic, right? So that's something we have to work through with our advisors. You can see course completion notes, where they're at, do they check in, have they completed their CCL at this time? Make sure you apply for graduation with that CCL. And this is a really interesting part of the process. I mean, we're putting courses on sticky notes, we're moving them around, we're trying to look from an advising perspective, from a core faculty perspective, from a content area perspective. How would that semester feel for a student in these classes? Does it make logical sense for their coursework? How heavy is the coursework load? And what kind of support will they need to be successful? That's all part of this mapping process. Then after you complete this, we do the same thing for part-time students, which is even more challenging. To try to figure out how someone's going to complete this degree. It's 6 credit hours a semester. We go through and put everything through ACRES, just like the previous curriculum process. And then from here, once they get moved on, maybe you're seeing some of these emails from Rose Rojas where she talks about batches. So we're sending batches of maps forward for completion and approval. And that's why I think the data is a little lagging, because I know we've completed maps that are for programs here at PV, but yet in that indicator it says PV doesn't have any maps completed. So I think we're just waiting for that to catch up. But it really is a very interesting process. You'll learn a lot more about curriculum. You'll learn a lot more about your colleagues and coworkers. And I would encourage you to at least shadow. Anyone can go to any mapping session. They've been very, very forward with how transparent this process is. Anyone can go to any mapping session and observe and participate. The question about how do I get my class in a map, remember we're not really talking about classes with guided pathways, we're talking about programs of study. And so what happens in this process, depending on the degree, some degrees are so straightforward, there are not really much room for electives. But if a degree does have an elective, you can see here that the group has just recommended an elective of a humanities tag, a general studies tag, maybe it's a literacy tag, an SV tag. We're not in this mapping process saying you must take Psych 101 or Soc 101. Students still have that ability to choose courses that fit the tag for the elective. So I know there were concerns early on, and people are thinking, well, whoever's on that team is going to get their course on the map, and that's not how this process works. It's a very open discussion, very open dialogue. And again, how much room is in the degree? Some of these degrees that are already filled with credits don't have a lot of space for additional electives. So that's a little bit about the mapping process. Are there any questions with that?
Could you click on the part-time tab to see kind of what that looks like?
This is a good effort.
So, yeah, you scroll down. So we have, as a mapping team, you have to get the degree mapped in 4 semesters for full-time. That's it. That's the criteria. For here, in part-time, you have a few more, and it's challenging. It is challenging, particularly if it's a degree with a lot of prereqs, because you have to fit them in.
So is the goal 10 terms then for part-time?
Maximum, yeah.
And then there's also the conundrum, which they haven't figured out how it's going to roll yet. If somebody is full-time, for instance, and they fail or they withdraw, now what? You know, will the system automatically put them back in that class for that next semester? I guess that's where advising, you know, the strong advising comes into play.
I think we're gonna have to do that throughout, because you can see like on the first slide, I brought this up in our session. There's one semester that required 19 credits. Not every student is gonna be able to take 18 or 19 credits a semester. So, even though this is a good outline, I think advisors are going to have to obviously personalize these per student. And I know a lot of our students can't do 18, 19 credits a semester. So it's a good outline. And it's a base that we can work with, but.
So when I was the chair of the IC, there was this whole initiative to remove hidden prereqs.
that I've been on, it doesn't appear that
And we could
I don't know when
set
that
any
was,
new
but-
programs within
Yeah.
prereqs.
There's a lot of people have said we weren't supposed to have any prereqs.
And they had this whole initiative to go through, and we had to personally go through some of our programs and remove hidden prereqs. So they just decided to stop doing it, or, okay.
Fixing it now, then.
Okay.
So that's what we're fixing it now. And I know he had a question.
So just, one's a thought in terms of, this still just does promote a fall spring enrollment pattern, so I don't know if term 1, term 2 could be summer or not, so just an observation in terms of changing the mindset of how students progress. And then my other question related to the ASU MAPS programs, I'm assuming that some of those are kind of already reverse mapped, given the lower division required courses for a baccalaureate degree?
Yeah, I guess I jumped over a lot of that. We start this meeting developing the SIP and the SOC codes and making sure that they're accurate. SIP is the educational program, SOCs are the occupational outcomes. So we go through, and we did a scrub here at PV last year with that in our occupational program. But we start with the SIP and the SOC and make sure that that educational program is going to match that outcome. Then we go through and we look at the maps at ASU. Which map fits best with this program? If NAU, U of A are also partners, we look at what programs they have. But we try to align this best to what's already been provided. So again, we're not creating really anything from scratch right now. Yeah, it's reverse math. Good question. Any other questions around math or the mapping process?
Just to piggyback on what Dr. Dale said, I think it would be great to include a summer track. And again, so I don't know if that's just when the advisor comes in and does it, or if we could create one that had some summer classes, and that would alleviate a student having to take 18 or 19 credits during the semester in the fall.
Right. Yeah, and there's a mapping meeting at Gateway Day that I'm going to. I'll bring those questions up.
Make a big difference.
We also talked about the number of students that come in with dual enrollment credits.
Right.
And so their semester is going to look different if they've already taken CIS and English 101. And their map now becomes easier. And that's something we can use as a marketing tool with our early college to bring students onto our campus. Yeah, there's a lot of good questions. That's what we do these forums for, so we can go back to these meetings at the district level and see where we're at.
And I think it's also important to remember, and a lot of these questions are kind of revolving around this, that all of these pieces are interconnected, right? And a big cog in this wheel is our advising aspect and how that's going to change, and the whole concepts that are being developed there. And so a lot of that is going to come, and I agree, I think that a summer track and seeing how these credits would parcel out instead of a 4-term, maybe a 6, for example, how that would work for a student. And I think a lot of that can come through that higher touch advising model too. Because one of the things I think that's an advantage here is when you put this in front of a student, when you put the 10-term versus the 4-term or 6-term or whatever in front of a student, they can make a decision here, right? With help, with assistance. And they can say, okay, I can see what this looks like, I can see what this looks like, and especially if you can do it in the ultimate technology tool that will be developed at some point. If they can actually click on things and see, okay, this is what this is going to look like for my life, with assistance, they can make a good decision at that point.
And that's what's been reported by other pathway schools. So they can sit down with students and say, here's your part-time track, here's your full-time track. Look at the cost, look at the time, and look at the outcome. And what they're finding is that students who thought they were going to attend part-time now end up going full-time and completing. Because when we just think about full-time and part-time, we're not necessarily envisioning what that means for my life in 2024 compared to 2022. And so when they see it on paper and they see the cost and they see the time, and we show them, I think what's really important out of all this, the resources that we have, so they're not in this on their own. We're going to have learning support resources, career services resources, just-in-time advising. We are going to help you be successful. They are choosing to go in that full-time route more often at those colleges. So, I think that's a very positive thing to look forward to here.
I think the technology piece is going to help some of this, because this is a great graphic. I'm linear, I like this. So if I was an incoming student, I'd like to see, if I was full-time, coming in full-time, then I can kind of see how my life would map out, but we all know that full-time might be unrealistic. 18 credit hours is highly unrealistic, I think. And life happens, so as long as we have that technology piece where it's keeping them on track, sort of like how NAU does Jack's Path, isn't that what it's called, Jack's Path? Yeah. Where it's tracking it for you so that you know what's coming next. It's a multi-modal way of keeping students on track, and I think that's how summer sessions and things like that could be seamlessly rolled in. It doesn't have to be third semester, it could be summer session between.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if we're creative, we can make them summer programs, or we can make concurrent enrollment during their senior year, so that they're doing their new student orientation, they're doing CPD 150, they're doing some of those classes before they even get here. There's just a different way of looking at it, thinking about it.
Yeah, so that's, we run over, as we always do. But if you have any questions, if your faculty, staff have questions, please have them contact us. Again, this is a very transparent process. So if you're hearing things like, I don't know what's going on with mapping, people are keeping it a secret, that's not the case. We couldn't be more open by having the team inviting anyone to go to any session and observe and participate and learn. And so if we're going to get these done by 2020, it is going to take everybody getting involved. And the pay is nice, but some folks are doing it for volunteer, and that's fantastic too. So if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks again for coming out to these sessions that we've had. Again, we'll have more in the spring. Have a good Friday. Enjoy your weekend.